The Orioles have certainly dug themselves a ginormous hole so far this season, but if they keep playing like they did on Wednesday night, they're going to have a chance to somehow climb out of it. I'll recap the huge win over the Tigers coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Thursday, June 12th, 2025, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the very impressive 10-1 win for the Orioles over the Detroit Tigers on Wednesday night. Get to the 5 things you need to know from maybe their best win of the season, including a dominant start from Zach Eflin, some big swings from Jordan Wesburg, and just in general, the Orioles offense breaking out, especially in that 8th inning. Then we'll talk a bit about some Orioles news and notes. Got a couple of guys who were DFA'd who are staying in the organization, a couple of interesting minor league signings that the Orioles made as well. And finally, some required reading just about some former Orioles and some things going on around Major League Baseball. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So let's start with an Orioles victory. Again, my apologies this episode, both wherever you listen and on YouTube, not out of its usual early morning timing here on Thursday. Just was not feeling my greatest Wednesday night. Wasn't really able to record late like I usually do, so it kind of delayed this episode getting out. But hopefully here's you, late morning, midday on Thursday. Still plenty of time to talk about that win on Wednesday night, and still wanted to get you an episode here on a Thursday because the Orioles, quite frankly, played one of their best games of the 2025 season, beating the Tigers 10-1 on Wednesday to even this series at 1 game apiece. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from that Orioles win on Wednesday night that got them to 27-39 on the season. And the first thing you need to know is that Zach Eflin was awesome. Full stop. Eflin, who missed a month earlier this season with that lat injury, came back and, he was okay. He had that one really bad start against the Nationals, but otherwise had 3 kind of, so-so, I guess, in total starts. And then since then, he's turned it back on. He had that great 7 scoreless innings against the White Sox. He had a good start last week. And then in this one, he just carved up a Detroit offense, which, is not known for its hitters. That's not the main reason why they came in having the best record in the American League. It's been the pitching they have and how they're able to put together a rotation and a bullpen to just get through so many outs in so many of these games. But don't sleep on the Tigers offense, which has the 6th highest amount of runs scored in baseball this season. So, you're looking at a team that they can hit. They can push runs across, and Zach Eflin did not let them do that. And people want to give Mike Elias crap for the deadline last year. There were certainly some bad deals, but the Zach Eflin trade from the Rays might have been the best trade that any team made at the 2024 deadline. I mean, he just cruised through 6 innings in this game. I mean, he retired all 7 leadoff batters he faced in all 7 innings. He didn't even allow a runner to reach second base until the 7th. Now, that 7th is when he did run into trouble, and it was only 86 total pitches that he threw. So maybe you could say he ran out of gas a little bit, but more, I think the Tigers just finally took some better swings against him in that 7th inning. After the first out of the inning with the O's up 2-0, they went single, double, made it a 2-1 game with 2nd and 3rd and 1 out. But even though Eflin didn't finish the 7th inning, the O's were able to get out of it and stay in the lead. But Zach he mixed all 6 of his pitches. None of his pitches he threw it even 25% of the time. So a true 6-pitch mix. He had a 58% in-zone rate, which is awesome. It seemed like he had everything working at the same time. And that is the best version of Zach Eflin. He's efficient. He gets a bunch of soft contact, and he's just able to kind of roll through these games. His final line was 6 2/3 of 1-run ball, 5 hits, 5 Ks, 1 walk, no homers, 86 pitches, and only 6 hard hit balls allowed by the Oriole right-hander. And again, he walked 1 batter. And if you're watching here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube page, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. But I'm going to show here, this is from the MLB.com game day feed. This is the 1 walk he had. It was a 4-pitch walk to Zach McKinstry. And you can see, like, yes, it was a 4-pitch walk, but look, first pitch curveball on the inside corner. Frankly, that was a strike that was called a ball. Second pitch curveball just barely below the knees, could have been called a strike. Third pitch sinker, could have been a strike on the corner. Fourth pitch fastball was a little further off the outside corner, but could have absolutely been called. I mean, you had 4 pitches basically in the shadow zone, that zone that could go either way, and all 4 were called balls. You could have a situation where all of them were called strikes, and he doesn't walk anyone. And that's such a Zach Eflin walk, right? He's not going to lose the ball in the dirt and have terrible command. He's just going to just miss barely, a half inch off the margins. And that leads to his 1 walk, and he probably got pissed at that 1 walk and did not walk anyone else for the rest of the game. But just awesome to have Zach Eflin in this rotation. Second thing you need to know from Wednesday night's win is that the bullpen was able to hold this one for the Orioles. Second and third, 1 out. As I mentioned, for Eflin, he induces a ground ball to third. Arias makes a nice throw. Adley makes a nice tag. They get the second out at the plate. And that was it for Zach Eflin. Keegan Aiken enters with runners on the corners and 2 outs in a 2-1 game with the lefty McKinstry coming to the plate. And maybe a little bit surprisingly, A.J. Hinch counters with a pinch hitter. He goes with the righty and former Oriole Jahmai Jones off the bench to pinch hit against Aiken. Kind of interesting for 2 reasons. One, even though McKinstry is a left-handed hitter, he's hit much better this year against left-handed pitching and really throughout his career. And also for Keegan Aiken, although he's a left-handed pitcher, has actually been better against right-handed hitters this season. Righties have only a 545 OPS against Aiken, while his lefties have an 865 OPS. He's not just been better, he's been way better against righties this year. And Aiken went up there, and Jahmai Jones, who just got called up last week, right? He hasn't had that many ABs this season. 4 straight fastballs, basically blew them all by him, gets the strikeout to strand the runners and keep the Orioles in the lead. They turn to high leverage Brian Baker. The O's had a 3-1 lead at that point. He goes 1-2-3 in the 8th to keep it that way. And then Felix Bautista, who hadn't pitched since Saturday, was ready to go. It's a 3-1 game in the bottom of the 8th. He's getting ready for a save situation. And then, as we'll talk about, the Orioles broke it open to a 10-1 game in the 8th. So eventually Felix sat down. They went to Gregory Soto, and he still did go 1-2-3 to close out the 9th inning. But the Orioles bullpen has just been spectacular in the month of June. This is the bullpen that, again, coming into the season, FanGraphs had projected to be the 2nd best bullpen in Major League Baseball. I said I think it's the best one. I talked about how this could be a historically good bullpen for the Orioles in 2025 with all the talented arms they had in there. And it's been kind of up and down, and a lot of the struggles they had early in the season was just because they were overworked. They were getting nothing from their starting pitchers, and this bullpen was taxed because it had to cover so many innings. But the starters have been better lately, including Eflin on Wednesday night, and that allows you to use your relievers in better spots and use them less. And when you do that and you have talent in the bullpen, you have what the Orioles have done in June. In the month of June, the Orioles relievers have pitched 30 2/3 innings, allowed just 2 runs on 14 hits with 40 strikeouts to 6 walks and 2 homers. That is a 0.59 bullpen ERA in June, the lowest by far in MLB this month. And again, the 2 runs were both solo home runs. Gregory Soto gave up 1 and Brian Baker gave up 1. That was it. That's all they've allowed. And that Soto home run he allowed was on the first batter the Orioles bullpen had faced in June. It was that June 1st Sunday game where the Orioles closed out the sweep against the White Sox. Soto relieved Charlie Morton in the 7th inning of that game, and he allowed a solo home run to Mike Tauchman, the first batter he faced out of the bullpen. And after that, the Orioles bullpen shut it down for a 3-2 win. So since that Soto home run, it's been 30 2/3 innings of 1-run ball for the Oriole bullpen. And they said it, Kevin Brown, and they put up a graphic on the Masson broadcast on Wednesday night. It is the longest streak by the Orioles bullpen of allowing only 1 run since June 9th through the 18th of 2015, when they went a stretch of 33 innings, only allowing 1 earned run. So if the Oriole bullpen has another good day here on Thursday night, they're going to break that streak from 2015. And that 2015 team, they went 8-2 in that 10-game stretch. The Orioles are 6-3 in their current stretch with the bullpen pitching well. That was the bullpens of old, the Brad Brocks, the Zach Britton, Darren O'Day, Brian Mattis, Tommy Hunter, Chaz Rowe was kind of the main bullpen back then for the O's. And this bullpen, honestly, you could argue has more talent than that one and are finally kind of showing it here in June. Now, the third thing you need to know from the Orioles win on Wednesday is that the bullpen did have to at least hold it down for 2 innings because the Orioles just could not come up with the big hit. Now, they did get 1 early Ramon Urias, a 2-run homer in the third inning off of Tiger starter Casey Mize on a first pitch sinker, just kind of scooped the ball out in left center field. Only Urias' third home run of the year, but after a Mullins leadoff double, Urias homered and made it 2-0. So of course that was a hit with a runner in scoring position, but that was the only hit with a runner in scoring position for a while. The Orioles started this game hitting 1 for 12 with runners in scoring position, with that only hit being the Urias 2-run shot. They got a leadoff double from Jordan Wesburg in the second. Couldn't bring him in. The big one was the fourth inning. Wesburg walked, and then Cowser singled, and Wesburg went to third with nobody out. And the Orioles went Laureano strikeout, Mullins strikeout, Urias ground out, and didn't even score one. And that kept it at a 2-0 game. And the Orioles still 29th in baseball with a 215 average and 27th with a 640 OPS when hitting with runners in scoring position. And overall, in all situations, their 240 average and 698 OPS is better. I mean, it's very clear that they've been just worse when they get a runner at second or third base. And that continued for most of the game on Wednesday. And it made you worry, like, hey, they're getting this great start. They're getting these runners on. They can't come through. This Tigers team, they started to rally in that seventh inning. Is it going to be another just gut punch loss for the Orioles because they can't come through with the big hit? But the fourth thing you need to know from the win is that in the eighth inning and kind of in the seventh too, the Orioles did finally get those big hits and did finally break it open. And it did start in the seventh. Adley led things off in the seventh inning with a double, and then Gunnar Henderson came through with an RBI single off of Tyler Holton to make it 3-1 O's. And it gave Gunnar his second straight game with a hit off a lefty with runners in scoring position. He only had one hit off a lefty in those situations. 1 for 16 all year coming into Tuesday. Gets an RBI single Tuesday, does it again with an RBI single off the really tough Tyler Holton on Wednesday. Awesome to see for Gunnar. Adley reached base 3 times, single, double, and a walk in this game. And in the month of June, the Orioles, again, the bullpen's been great. They're playing much better baseball. They are getting the Adley and Gunnar that we know they can get. Adley has a 206 WRC plus. Gunnar has a 193 WRC plus. They've both been basically top 20 hitters in baseball in the month of June. They've been the Orioles' 2 best hitters in June. These are the hitters we know and love in this Oriole lineup, and that is what they're showing right now. And then in the eighth, the Orioles just kind of piled on in a lot of different ways. Mullins had an RBI double to make it 4-1. His first multi-double game since July 5th of 2023 at Yankee Stadium. He later scored on a wild pitch to make it 5-1. Then the Tigers went to Bo Brisky, a right-handed reliever, but with a dominant changeup. He just dominates left-handed hitters with that changeup to face all the lefties in the top of the order with 2 outs in the eighth. AJ Hinch just trying to keep it at 5-1, give his team a chance. And the Orioles, with their lefties, were all over Bo Brisky. Jackson Holiday single, Adley walked, Gunnar walked, O'Hearn 2-run single, and then a Jordan Wesburg 3-run homer down the left field line to cap it off and make it a 10-1 game. I mean, Wesburg with homers in now both games since coming off the injured list. Like, this is what a healthy Orioles lineup can look like. And they're still not fully healthy. They're still waiting on Gary Sanchez and Tyler O'Neill to come back. But with the young kind of long-term pieces, they finally, for the first time on Tuesday night, they had Gunnar, Colton Cowser, Jordan Wesburg, Cedric Mullins all in the same lineup. And they had it again on Wednesday. That is what it can look like. They can score 10 runs. They're second most of the season. The only other time they scored more runs is when they put up 12 runs on opening day against the Blue Jays. They had 16 hits in this game. That is a season high in hits, 16 of them that they had. That is what they stole 3 bases. They walked 4 times. They did basically everything right, except for the fact that, again, they started 1 for 12 with runners in scoring position. They obviously came through a lot more in the 7th and 8th innings to pour it on. If they can fix that, this is the offense. These are the guys. This is what it should look like. They're not going to get 10 runs every night. We know that, especially with Tarek Skubal on the mound tonight. But this is what it can and should look like more times than not. And this shows you how big of a factor health was, how big of a factor it was to not have Jordan Wesburg in there. He really is the glue. That's what Tony Mansolino called him. And to have those big swings again is just awesome to see. And the fifth and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 10-1 win over the Tigers on Wednesday night is that Ryan O'Hearn, that single he had to drive into in the 8th, he may have needed that hit more than anyone. Came up with the bases loaded, 2 outs. He was already 0 for 4 on the night. It was a 5-1 lead, and he lines a 2-run single into center field. That kind of put the game away. It made it 7-1 in the 8th. And for O'Hearn, yeah, it was only 1 hit. It was still a 1 for 5 night, but he's kind of been in his first mini slump of the season. O'Hearn has been, without question, the Orioles' best hitter for the first 2 months of the year. He had been at one point the best hitter in the American League, not named Aaron Judge. But in the month of June, he slumped a bit. He's just 5 for 30. All 5 of his hits are singles. He has 10 strikeouts to only 2 walks in June, where he just hadn't been striking out at all for the first 2 months of the year. Now, he didn't strike out on Wednesday, but it was nice to see him get that hit. When he got to first base, he gave Anthony Sanders, the Orioles first base coach, a huge hug, kind of a little bit of a monkey off the back hit, because he knows that, hey, he's been struggling a bit in June. If you can get O'Hearn to the level of April and May, plus Gunnar and Adley at this level, and then Cowser and Wesburg back in the lineup, again, another reason why this lineup can fly through things and be back to the talent level we know they have. Nice to see O'Hearn get a hit, because you're not upset with him because he's carried the offense at times this year. He's going to have a little slump. It was just nice to see him get a little one and hopefully break out of it with that swing on Wednesday that helped the Orioles to a 10-1 win to even up the series. Also got some news and notes for the Orioles, a little bit of roster stuff, some intriguing stuff that I wanted to talk about. That is coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. And FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And surprisingly, the Indiana Pacers, with a win on Wednesday, they now have a 2-1 series lead in the NBA Finals over the Thunder. Did not really see that coming for the Pacers. And, maybe now is the time, if you really think the Thunder are the much better team, which I still do, is to get on the Thunder, now trailing 2-1 in the series. And you can do that at FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. You can head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. So the O's got the win on Wednesday night, 10-1. We also had some roster news, little news and notes stuff to get to that I just wanted to run through here on the show. Let's start with Matt Bowman, who was DFA'd on Sunday. He has cleared waivers again and has actually again accepted his outright assignment to AAA Norfolk. So Bowman, who cleared waivers, then had the opportunity to say, no, I'm not going to stay. I'm going to become a free agent. But he decided to stay in the organization in AAA. And he's already done that once this year. He was DFA'd earlier this year, and that time he also chose to stay with the O's in AAA. And he chooses it again because he knows he'll get another shot, right? Bowman at this point is the next bullpen arm. If the Orioles have any kind of injury in the bullpen right now, Bowman, I would think, would be the next guy they would call up. He's got a 4.57 ERA in 21 2/3 innings pitched in relief for the Orioles this season. Again, that ERA is upped by a couple of really blow-up outings when he was just dead tired and still had to pitch for the O's. But otherwise, it's been a nice multi-inning, kind of low-leverage guy to have in that pen. Now, he had thrown 2 1/3 scoreless innings against the A's on Saturday to kind of save the O's bullpen. The Orioles had traded for Scott Blewett. They needed to get him on the roster. They needed a fresh arm. So really the only move to do was to activate Blewett and DFA Bowman on Sunday. So luckily he clears waivers. He's awesome bullpen depth to have in AAA. And I can pretty much guarantee you Bowman will pitch for the Orioles out of the bullpen again at some point this year and might go through the same cycle multiple times, getting called up and DFA'd again. Just the Orioles definitely do want him to stick around. Similar thing happened with the outfielder Jordan Adams. Remember, he was up for a bit last week with Cedric Mullins out. He had like one at bat. He never started a game. Basically was the defensive replacement for the Orioles in the outfield because they kept having to play Jorge Mateo and Heston Kjerstad in the outfield because Cowser and Mullins and Moore and Laureano were out. Well, now they've got Laureano and Cowser and Mullins all back. Mateo's on the IL, Kjerstad's in AAA. There really wasn't a need for Jordan Adams. They ended up DFAing him. He also did clear waivers, and he has been outrighted to AAA Norfolk, so he also stays in the organization. A little different than Bowman because there's a good chance the Orioles don't need Adams again this year. I think they'll need Bowman again at some point this year, but it's always nice. Adams, a guy who they, former top prospect, debuted with the Angels. O's brought him in on a minor league deal this offseason. He's been nice depth to have in AAA, and it was obviously good to have him to at least be a defensive replacement late in games in the big leagues for about a week. If they need him to do that again, he'll still be in AAA Norfolk, and they can call on him if they need to. Luis F. Castillo, you may remember him about a month ago. The Orioles acquired him in a small trade with the Seattle Mariners. No, not that Luis Castillo. This is Luis Castillo, who was also on the Mariners and had made a handful of big league starts with Seattle as kind of a fill-in starter, had mostly been at AAA, but he was DFA'd by the Mariners and the Orioles went and got him just to provide some starting pitching depth in AAA. Well, he never even pitched a game for the Norfolk Tides because just a couple of days after he came over to the Orioles, he suffered an injury and had to go immediately on the injured list. He missed about a month, and now finally the Orioles sent him on a rehab assignment to the FCL, the Rookie Ball League in Florida. He pitched an inning and 2/3 with 4 strikeouts on Tuesday in the FCL in his first outing in the Orioles system. So hopefully that means he is on his way back to joining the Tides and being starting pitcher depth, whether he's in their rotation or is a reliever. Either way, he's going to be in Norfolk here at some point soon. And it was just nice to get him back there and be some more starting depth in AAA for the Orioles to need. Now, they are getting healthier in that department, so they're in less of a need now than they were a month ago when they actually acquired Castillo, but they're absolutely still going to hold on to this guy, have him as depth, and use him if they need to at some point this season. And speaking of pitching depth, the Orioles did sign 2 pitchers to minor league deals this week as well to kind of give some more depth to their organization. The first one is very interesting. It is 25-year-old right-hander Devin Kirby, the 5'10 righty the Orioles signed to a minor league deal this week. He had pitched at UConn and then was signed by the Twins as an undrafted free agent after the 2023 draft when he was not selected. He pitched in junior college for 2 years. Then he got Tommy John and missed all of 2021. Then he was one of UConn's kind of long relief / bullpen aces in 2022 and 23. I actually saw him pitch live when UConn was at the College Park Regional against the Terps in 2022. Saw him throw 4 1/3 innings of 1-run ball in relief against Maryland in that game 6 of that regional when the Terps actually did walk it off in extra innings, but he had kind of some interesting stuff. Now, he was with the Twins in low A this year, and the stats weren't great. 6.45 ERA and 22 1/3 innings with a 24% strikeout rate, which is solid, but a 15% walk rate, which is way too high. But I did kind of bury the lead on why Devin Kirby is exciting. You might think, Connor, this is a guy who is 25 years old, had a 6 ERA in low A, was signed by the Orioles, and at 25 is reporting to Delmarva. You know, there's a lot of players who are 25 and in the big leagues already. Why should I be excited about this guy? Well, he is a knuckleballer, and that is why you should be excited. Now, he really, he kind of discovered he could throw the knuckleball in high school and college, but he didn't really throw it in games. It was mostly like a 90-mile-per-hour fastball with a changeup and a slider from the right-hander when he was pitching at UConn. But he got, he didn't get drafted. He started pitching, I believe, briefly somewhere in maybe indie ball before he got signed by the Twins and really started to throw the knuckleball. And somebody who knew him knew somebody in the Twins and said, hey, look at this guy's knuckleball. The Twins gave him a chance. It's knuckler in the high 70s that reaches up to 80 miles an hour. That's pretty firm for a knuckleball. But, he even when signing with the Twins, he was throwing it, but he was still throwing the fastball and the changeup and the slider. But the Twins sent him to the Arizona Fall League last year to get him more innings. And then when he got to Arizona, he was still throwing his fastball a little bit, but he was throwing mostly knuckleballs in the Arizona Fall League. He's been working with former Oriole Mickey Janis, who debuted with the O's as knuckleballer in 2021, also a former guest of the Locked On Orioles podcast. So there are some connections there, but he's going to go to Delmarva. I am so excited to watch that first outing for Kirby. Again, he's going to throw some fastballs, some sliders, and changeups. It's not going to be 100% knuckleballs, but he was throwing, 60 to 75% knucklers in the Arizona Fall League, doing some of that with the Twins in low A this year before he was released. Just always exciting. Who knows how far he'll take this, but always exciting to see a knuckleball and excited to watch him in the minor leagues. Then the other guy the Orioles got, left-handed pitcher Sayer Diedrich. They also signed to a minor league deal this week. 24-year-old 6-foot lefty who pitched at Nebraska for a couple of years, then at the NAIA Power LSU Shreveport in 2022 and 23. LSU Shreveport, you may know by they set a college baseball record this year, went 59-0 and won the NAIA National Championship, the first college baseball team at any level to complete a perfect undefeated season with a national championship. But after he was done at Shreveport, he didn't get signed by an affiliated team, so he pitched an indie ball for the Billings Mustangs and the Lincoln Salt Dogs. He also pitched in the MLB Draft League in 2022 and 24, where he got some looks from some big league teams. But this minor league deal with the O's is his first contract in affiliated ball. I think he has some Nebraska connections with Braxton Bragg when he was there and with Cade Povich when he was there, so kind of knows those guys. And he'll start off in the FCL. We'll kind of see what happens. The stuff, it's a four-seam fastball at a sinker, kind of around 91. He's up to 94. His best pitch is his changeup from the left side. That's his out pitch. He also throws a sweeper as well. So just some more minor league depth. Again, he'll get his feet under him in the FCL, and then we'll probably, I would think, see him at maybe Delmarva, but more likely Aberdeen at some point this season, working out of the bullpen. Two interesting signings, but definitely a little more interested in Devin Kirby. Cannot wait to see that knuckleball. One more thing to get to, just wanted to talk about some really good baseball journalism being done and the way we think about players. Just wanted to chat about that briefly in the final segment to finish the show. Coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Game Time. If you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family, maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you can save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app, they actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. And they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. And Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB and Locked On Orioles, making it easy to browse the app for maybe some games on this homestand. Maybe you want to go to Orioles Tigers tonight. I'm planning to be in the ballpark for Orioles Angels on Friday night. Maybe you want to grab some tickets and come say hello at the ballpark. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB. That is LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So the last thing I wanted to discuss today before we get going is just some really, really good journalism being done in both the Baltimore Banner and the Athletic this week. Just talking about the things that baseball players go through off the field. And I want to start with over at the Banner. There were two really well done, really, really great stories, very sad stories, very in-depth stories done by Lee Sanderlin and Danielle Allentuck, and I'm sure others helped over at the Baltimore Banner that came out on Thursday morning, really diving into a lot more reporting with the tragic death of former Oriole Brian Mattis, who passed away in early January, and kind of the report surfacing now that it was indeed an overdose. He was found in his home in Arizona, and just a great look into Mattis's life and really what a lot of players go through when they go through retirement. The reporting in the story from the Banner was fantastic. Please go and read both stories that are up so far on Thursday morning. And I'm sure Danielle and Paul and everyone would be happy for me to mention it is just $1 to get 6 months access to the Baltimore Banner. So for $1, you can read that amazing reporting all the time, but especially on Thursday morning, just about, the background of Mattis and how, his mental health played a factor into him turning to drugs off the field and what he went through, even, when he was a top pitching prospect as a starter for the Orioles. And then when they moved him to the bullpen in 2012, he was a fantastic reliever as lefty for 4 years there, dominated David Ortiz. But the talk was that, he started to change as a person because he was upset he got moved to the bullpen, and that kind of started things. And then when he was kind of forced into retirement because teams didn't want him, he kept trying to come back and never really accepted that his professional baseball playing career was over and really couldn't come to terms with that. And that became a really dark spot in his life. And it seems like it's something that happens for a lot of other players, not just the tragic story of Brian Mattis. There's a lot of other tragic stories out there that it can be really difficult for professional athletes when they do retire, whether it's forced or their decision or a combination of both on what to do next. These are guys who retire sometimes in their mid-30s, even after having a really good career in their sport, and you still have 40, 50 plus years remaining of your life. You're not even halfway through your life. And it feels like, what do I do next? And guys definitely struggle with that. And I just encourage you to go and read the story because it's a lot of background into just how sad this story not just was for Brian Mattis, but for his family, friends, and kind of everyone, his former teammates, kind of everyone involved in this. Definitely a lot of dark parts in that story as well. I would say trigger warning for overdose and for domestic abuse as well when you are reading that story, but definitely just an interesting introspective look into the life and career of Mattis and what these players go through. And I wanted to pin it alongside some stories and reporting that came out in the Athletic earlier this week. I believe they all dropped on Wednesday. The Athletic does kind of a player poll every season where they talk to anywhere from like 100 to 200 different players, early in the season. They talked to them anonymously and they asked them different questions like, hey, is the most fun player to watch in the league? Or, hey, what manager would you want to play for? But there was also a couple of good stories. One was about, what do fans not really see or not really understand about your life, mostly off the field? And it was good look into, how tough it can be to be just on the road traveling for 6 months of the year. You're never seeing your family and you're never really off because even when the season's not happening, you're training all the time to try and get that next contract or get that next roster spot or whatever it may be. And I understand, as these guys are making millions of dollars. Even the guys on minimum contracts are making $760,000 per year. I totally get that. That's a lot more money than you and me and everyone combined will make for a long time. However, it doesn't take away from the human aspect of that. And again, I encourage you to go read those stories in The Athletic from this week as well. It really shows you the human side. Like these ball players, the 90+% of the time I talk about them here on this podcast is about what they're doing on the baseball field. But first and foremost, they are humans. They are living their lives as human beings outside of Oriole Park, outside of the stadium, wherever it may be. And they go through a lot of these things. Just because they made $3 million last year playing baseball doesn't mean they're not stressed about how to get childcare and not being able to see their families because they're on the road and living out of a suitcase for 6 months of the year. I think it's just good perspective to have as you think about these players and you talk about them from this perspective or from whatever perspective. I think just those stories in the Banner and the stories in The Athletic this week, I think were just really, really important because, again, it can be tough to remember. These are human beings, too, outside of the diamond. And I think that's important perspective that I try to keep when I, talk about this team 5 days per week. And I think it's important for fans to keep that perspective as well and be able to balance. Like, yes, they're making more money than I'll ever see in my life, but also they still have real things, real problems, real issues that they go through just like you and me. And they are at the end of the day human beings and deserve to be treated like human beings as well. But I think just the follow-up is go read those stories in the Banner and The Athletic. I think just important reporting done there and some good perspective to get as a serious baseball fan or even a casual fan, just to get a little insight more into these people who we watch on a daily basis throughout the summer. That'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks for being patient as this one dropped a little bit later than usual. Orioles are back in action. They're trying to win a series. It's not going to be easy. Not only are they playing the best team in the American League in the Detroit Tigers, they're facing the best pitcher in the world right now. That's Tarik Skubal with his 2.16 ERA on the season in 13 starts. He casually went 7 2/3 of one-run ball against the Cubs the last time out. And not only is it Tarik Skubal, but he's a lefty. And the Orioles are the worst offense in baseball against lefties. And Tarik Skubal, lefty or righty, is the best pitcher in baseball right now. It might not end well, but hey, you never know. We'll see what happens. Maybe the Orioles can pitch as well as they've been pitching. They can scratch across a run or two against Skubal, maybe get him out of the game early. And you never know. Maybe they do have a chance to win a baseball game against the Tigers. Orioles are going with an opener in tonight's game. The Osei Keegan Aiken will start as the opener. Dean Kramer was the originally scheduled starter. No word yet as I'm recording here if Kramer will still kind of be the bulk relief pitcher starting in the second or if they'll do something different. But either way, you'll see Aiken and then hopefully Dean Kramer in tonight's game. And then I'll be back tomorrow to recap Game 3 between the Orioles and the Tigers. Get you ready for the weekend series between the O's and the Angels and maybe do another check-in on this kind of current state of this Orioles roster. But that's coming up on tomorrow's episode. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.